Welcome to the Shield Wall Podcast, where tempered men are formed, proud members of the Society of Reformed Podcasters.
Hey everybody out there in podcast land, my name is Cody. Welcome to another episode of the Shield Wall Podcast, a podcast of expository discipleship ministries. The Shield Wall Podcast exists to glorify Jesus Christ and to make disciples in His name. I just want to say thank you for tuning in today. Thank you to all the longtime listeners. Welcome again and thank you for subscribing. To all our newer audiences, I want to say thank you for listening, and we hope you go back to explore our previous episodes. If you're new, even if you're a long-time listener and you haven't yet, please subscribe, like us on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram, share our post, and tell your friends about the Shield Wall Podcast, where tempered men are formed. Speaking of tempered men, I want to introduce to our audience the man behind the music of our intro and our outro songs, none other than Mr. Jeremiah McCann. For those of you who don't know who Jeremiah is, he has worked in the professional AV industry as an engineer, a programmer, and a live event producer for federal agencies, nonprofit agencies, and private sector businesses. Jeremiah has performed in and organized many bands across the very vastly different genres, most notably Skyhawk Drive, reaching number one on internet streaming services, featured on iTunes' new and noteworthy iTunes What Were They Listening To, along with national tours such as Vans Warped Tour, Creation Music Festival, and international radio play, and signing to Skies Fall Media. Jeremiah's side projects include working as a composition and performance consultant with local studios and gathering musicians for a showcase called Coffee and Dreadnoughts, which we'll talk about on today's episode, which is a showcase that features local artists and quality coffee. Jeremiah's current projects include a relaunch of his local music group, The Boutonnieres, which we'll also talk about today on the podcast episode. They are set to release their first single next month, along with an EP later this month. Jeremiah is also the son of a pastor. He is one of the worship leaders at his church, and he's a fascinating man, and I just wanted to bring him on today. So, Jeremiah?
Hello.
How you doing, man?
I am hanging in there, brother.
This is actually one of the first times where we've had a face-to-face conversation. I've seen you a few times when you've performed here at your church. You set up it was a annual, right?
Yeah. Are you talking the Coffee and Dreadnoughts?
Coffee and Dreadnoughts.
Awesome. Yeah. We put on a annual event. Sometimes we do it in January, but most of the time we're doing it at the end of August, early September.
And I saw a promotion come on, so sponsors work on Facebook ads. Saw a sponsor promotion. I'd already liked the band that you were in, but it came up and it just said, hey, I'm revisiting this project with another good friend, Chris Lopez. He's on there, and he's performing with you as probably the bass or saxophone or whatever he does best.
Yeah, Chris Low-End Lopez. He's the best, man. He's a local hired gun, for sure. He's played in every local band you can think of, and we kind of brought him in to be a part of that project, and then he kind of he became kind of the John Lennon to my Paul McCartney.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so now we're starting to write together and no longer be the local guns for hire, even though we're still doing that. I mean, I think Chris literally played with Maggie Miles last night. And so we have our independent projects, but yeah, we came together to do more Coffee and Dreadnoughts work together under the Boutonnieres.
And the Boutonnieres, for those that don't know, it's one of those bands. It's been around, right?
Yeah.
It has many inceptions. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So when I got out of the touring life and the don't have a job, just play music life, I wanted a project that I could start that didn't have rules like a normal band does, because a lot of when you're touring and you're an official band, there's all these unspoken rules and whatnot, and I really wanted to kind of break that and get a group of guys that are a part of other bands and kind of do a super group kind of feel. And so we started the Boutonnieres, I believe, for my brother's wedding, because we wanted to play all these songs that we always loved. And so we just wanted to cover these songs that were just old school rock songs or old school country folk songs and stuff like that. And so we got together and started doing cover songs. And we literally built Coffee and Dreadnoughts, the event, around the Boutonnieres. We wanted a place where we could play and perform, but we wanted to control the atmosphere a little and make it around our schedules and our time. So it's always been this very amoeba flowing band of anybody can join this band if they want to. That was kind of the main concept, and there's not a lot of rules. We can play whatever we want to play kind of thing and perform with, we've had upwards of like 12 people on stage at once playing with like mandolins and harps and stuff like that, to trios. So the new Boutonnieres project is a simplistic version of all that. We are now doing original content, because before we didn't ever do any original writing or any original songs. And so probably about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, we got together, Ethan, Dean, and I, and started writing some stuff together, and brought in, like I said, Chris Lopez, and we started writing songs and trying to figure out what did we want to do, where did we want to go, what genres we were going to be a part of, and letting the music and the writing take us into the direction, and then kind of refine it from there. So we've written quite a few songs, and some of those songs are just never going to make it out there because we said, this isn't really what we're maybe going towards. Maybe we're going towards something like this, but in the end, it's just a stripped down rock and roll band. We love old school blues, not cheesy blues, like actual kind of like heart-wrenching blues stuff, along with soul and groove. We just really love the soul and groove stuff from the 70s and late 60s. And so that's what we're going for.
So the name, Boutonnieres, where does that come from?
I think I came up with it in like late high school, believe it or not, this would be a cool band name. I always had this running list of song names, band names, and tour names that I have like this giant library of. And so I had that in the runnings because I thought it sounded pretty cool. But yes, it's just the decorative wrist flower from prom. That's what a boutonniere is.
I like it. I remember doing that too as a kid in high school, just writing down like cool names.
Oh,
like
yeah.
What you'd think were
maybe
on the spotlight.
Yep. And some I'm literally using now.
Nice.
It's so funny. There's things I came up in high school that I'm like, hey, this wasn't a bad idea. I'm going to use this. And then there's some you're like, oh geez, this is terrible.
So coffee, where does that come into play in this? I know that your brother may have a part in that.
Oh yeah, so Josiah McCann, my brother, he's a coffee connoisseur, mastermind, and we wanted to bring the world of coffee and Dreadnought. And if you don't know what a Dreadnought is a warship, but Martin Guitar Company named their main model guitar after that ship, called a Dreadnought. So if you ever in the guitar store, you can see that there's Dreadnoughts as an option. So we brought coffee and Dreadnoughts together, kind of, since my brother is the coffee guy and I'm the music guy, we wanted to kind of bring that together. I love coffee. I don't love coffee in the cool guy sense. I'm not like I'll have a black coffee and it'll be amazing and no cream in mine.
Right.
I love sugar more than I love coffee, but to me, sugar and coffee are best friends. And I know coffee people don't like that.
No, yeah, I'm a coffee and cream guy.
Yeah.
So sugar is already naturally in there.
Yeah.
So I, by
there
default, am including sugar.
Yep.
So there's like strict.
We're the
fundamentalist.
non-purists.
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, you still got sugar in there. So how can people get in contact if they would like to be a part of this, if they're in this area, or how do you do that? Do you find the artist and try to bring them in and make sure the palette is agreeable?
So we have a little committee that meet and discuss who do we want to perform. And it's all done through my brother and I, really, but
the committee is the
committee is us too,
That's awesome.
And really when it comes to the music, the committee is me.
That's great. You and your brother have that relationship, though.
Yeah,
Awesome.
We trust each other. You have to trust each other because then it doesn't work. I trust him with the coffee stuff, and he trusts me with the music stuff, and we just kind of make it happen. But we planned the first one, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago or something like that, and we've had one every year since.
And they've all been, the ones that I've been the last 2 or 3 years have been amazing. Like
thank you, man.
They've been local shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they've been shows with excellence.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
You've brought in these vendors that sort of bring it to another level. And I think last year you had these tasty treats. Like you included both coffee, but you also included these delicate treats.
All handmade treats that get donated by people from Catoctin Bible Church and people that are part of the Coffee Dreadnoughts kind of community. But the whole reason we really wanted to do it as well was we focus on the word showcase. Because it's not like a normal local show where it's like in a gym somewhere and there's terrible lighting and you kind of stand all there awkwardly until you get like blared with music. And there like maybe a metal band will show up and, out of like these acts that aren't metal acts. And so there's kind of like this weird, it's like a broken shuffle. But we wanted to make a showcase. We have seats, so it's not a punk rock show. Because I really love sitting down. I don't know about you. Sitting down's a great pastime.
Yeah, as I get older, I appreciate the seats. When I was younger, I was in those pits. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those are great. But we make it a showcase, and we love to kind of make it a little bit more intimate because it forces you. The chairs are facing the stage. Because we want to force people to watch exactly what's going on, and it's way more intimate in a good way, not in an awkward way. Because we want to make the atmosphere nice and welcoming, but we also want to say, hey, this is a showcase. These people are here to perform, and they've worked countless hours in writing and getting groups of people together to show you. And if you're not facing them, it's really weird for you as an artist on stage to see that, a percentage of people are looking down at their phone or a percentage of people are engaged in conversations and huddles and clicks in different parts of the room. So
I remember you had, I think it was Butler.
Yeah.
They had a fantastic show.
Oh, yeah.
Like for those that are in the local area, Butler is Nathan Bittner. And like you were saying before we started, like you don't even call him that anymore. You just call him Butler.
Yeah.
And it brings the level of professionalism that you guys have to this local scene, and you guys have crafted that well. You've taken care of that, and hopefully this year you'll have that again.
Yeah,
you'll bring back some familiar faces. Anybody in the workings that might be a new showcase?
I can't announce anything officially yet because contracts haven't been signed, but we have a very good lineup coming. We like you were saying earlier with the podcast vision, same thing with Coffee and Dreadnoughts vision. We love doing local people. We love when they're from Virginia or close by because we share borders with Maryland and Pennsylvania and whatnot. So we do have some acts that come out of there. But we love the local scene. We know that being a part of the local scene is very important and building up that atmosphere. So it's kind of crazy to send people to Lovettsville, Virginia. We've had offers to move Coffee and Dreadnoughts to larger buildings, but we even like that it's a small building that we can kind of cram people in here and they get a little bit of that different showcase feel.
You got like the local punk feel because you got right out front. It's the street.
Yep.
You're right next door to a restaurant and you've got a gravel parking lot right over here. It just reminds me of going to a little to the places on the outskirts of when I was in high school. Like, where's the show at? Where's the show at? It's down the street, just a few more blocks.
Yep.
And then you get there, and it's just like all your friends are bundled together.
We do have air conditioning. That's the big difference between those kind of shows. It's not in like a shanty under a bridge.
Yeah, we're actually recording in the place that you'll have that later this year, which is great. And how can people stay in contact with the updates on that? Facebook, website?
You can go on. You can check out our Facebook. You can just look up Coffee and Dreadnoughts. There's not a lot of places called Coffee and Dreadnoughts. We have a website, Coffee and Dreadnoughts, or coffeedreadnoughts.com. You can go there to check out announcements and whatnot. And you can contact us through there. If you have a band that's local that's interested in performing, you can go on there and contact us.
Nice. And the project you are working on with Chris Lopez, they can find you where? Online?
You can. Our website is live. It's theboutonniers.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. I think our Instagram is _Boutonniers or something like that. But yeah, you can find us all on there. We have our first single will be releasing July 2nd. So that'll be our first single release. And then from there, we're going to try to release an EP. But the Boutonniers... Oh, sorry,
go ahead.
The Boutonniers will definitely be playing Coffee and Dreadnoughts. That's the one band I can say.
I was going to say, did you book yourself?
We book ourselves, yeah.
The committee of you.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll be there.
We'll sign it. We'll let it slide.
Do you have any shows that are coming up before then?
No, we're focused on writing. Focused on recording and writing and still defining where do Chris and I want to take this.
So I might actually ask you and Chris to do a live show.
Yeah, man.
Podcast.
Let's do it.
And do something like that before Coffee and Dreadnoughts to get the flavor out.
Yeah, let's do it.
Another thing is, I always ask people when they come on, what's your Christian story? Talk about that, because that's primarily an area where our listeners want to know. How is your faith shaping what you're working on? You can go anywhere you want with this.
Yeah. So I'm a pastor's kid, and there's usually gasps after that. Like, what did you do? Are you a bad one? Like, so many of them out there. Just kidding.
Well, are you a sinner?
Of course.
You confess these things.
Oh dear. Yeah. Oh dear. Of course I am.
There, you on level playing ground, even with me, not a pastor's kid.
That's right. So my dad and my mom have been in youth ministry for 30 years down in Miami. Really Miami area, in a little place called Miramar in between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. That's where I was born and raised. And my dad was a teacher at Florida Bible College. And then we attended Florida Bible Christian School, and my dad was the youth pastor there for the high school. So I was kind of born and thrown into that environment. My parents ran these very large youth camps in Daytona Beach, and they would take them on this place called the Peace River on some spring break adventure things, and hundreds and hundreds of kids would come. It was a very big deal, and so seeing that and growing up into that was really cool. And then moving from Florida to Virginia was tough, but we were hooked up with a good church, and I've always had a good community, because I think that's really a huge part of feeling like you're a part of something good to keep you on the right track, is that community aspect. So I've been very blessed within that, and really my family is a very large part of that. And being actively involved in the ministries my parents were a part of. I was always doing something during those camps, even if I was a kid. And I was always a leader at, one of the summer camps with the kids and stuff like that, and always involved with the music ministries as well. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff.
When did you figure out that you could actually play the guitar and play it well?
So, my family is a very musical family. My dad played and toured in a band called Malachi in the late 70s, early 80s. He played bass with them, and they toured around. And so I had a musical background. He always would play some really cool stuff when we were kids, and music was always a big part of our life because it was also a part of ministry. And so I always had this want to play music, especially since it was a part of the family. I remember in Thanksgivings and family reunions and stuff, all my uncles would sit around and play guitar, and we would just jam out and sing these songs together. And I always wanted to be a part of that, and that was really inspiring, And so that's when I remember asking my dad if I could try his guitar out, and he kind of showed me a few chords. And from there, it was amazing. I'd have different inspirations along the way. We kind of getting away from just playing acoustic guitar with my uncles to something different was my dad was also had a really cool band, like a worship band that would play really fun music for outreaches and events at the church in Florida. And his drummer was my best friend's mom, and she would sneak us to punk rock shows and ska shows. So we'd go out and see Five Iron Frenzy and the W's and MXPX and stuff like that. And that definitely opened my eyes of, I need to be involved with music, because it's this community. That was the thing about ska, is you listen to ska now and you're like, this is weird. But at the shows, the community in those shows and the feeling of you're around these other Christians that are not just the four guys at your church that also wear Jinko jeans. There was this huge, large atmosphere that you now were a part of, and I wanted to be a part of that for sure. And so I definitely came home and was like, Dad, I want an electric guitar. And he was like, you should get an acoustic. And I said, I really want electric. And he was like, cool, let's go. And he bought me an electric guitar, which is very controversial to start with an electric guitar. You're supposed to start with an acoustic guitar, but my dad saw that there was no stopping me. I wanted the electrified version to be loud.
You wanted to be heard.
Yes. Oh, yes.
That community part, yeah, I mean, I dabbled a little bit in trying to be in a band, and that community part where it just becomes family. You're with these guys, you're going with them to these shows where it almost seems like you're the only ones that are listening to this music, and they're the part of your life that nobody understands, and you're with them. You're investing a lot of time, a lot of sweat, too, traveling to some of these shows. And like you were talking about, this place would have chairs for your coffee and dreadnoughts. Most shows don't have chairs. Yeah. You're there, you're packing people in, you're at capacity, and you're just there, you're having fun. Yeah. So there's a part of that where I definitely identify with. When I became a Christian, went to church, very formal, everybody sitting down, the music. Didn't understand what church music was about for a long time. Didn't understand what was going on, because to me it was boring. Yeah. Didn't really speak to the heart notes that I was familiar with. As I grew, I understood like the contemplative parts. It's slow. Some of these songs, they just are horrible. I'll get over that. Oh yeah. It's preferences. There's multi-generations. People will listen to this song before I got here. I'm not going to try to, fix things, but I definitely identify with what you're saying about how when you see the music and you see, there's a community, there's a part of where you just want to create and want to build, you want to produce something. You said earlier that you couldn't unattach essentially from it being a ministry and music. Do you still see that? Like, how's that view work for you now? Yeah, I think it goes back to the aspect of, and we were kind of talking about this earlier, is I feel like in my experience with Christianity, it's always been about you need to live in this box. The modern American Christian church is saying, we don't like that. We want you to do this. We want you to sing this song. We want you to act this way. And we want to put you in this box. And if you're not a part of this box, that's going to be a problem. And I knew that in my mind, before I could hear this from important people, that art is of God when there's not a moral conflict. Right. And so anything good is of God because God is good. And so this idea that if I play this beautiful song about my struggle, that's not worship, or that's not God honoring, is a weird concept to me, because we are broken people and there's nothing perfect about us. And so why do we have to put on a fake, disingenuous feel of the music that's supposed to be? And I know the word authenticity gets thrown around so much. Now it's less about, I was talking to my barber about this yesterday. It becomes less about like, oh, we need to be authentic, because if you're having to try to work to be authentic, are you messing with the authenticity? Like, what about just doing it and then editing it? if you like, there's so much gray area there. And so I think you have to, I've never separated, Christianity and truth from music, or ministry from music, because to me there's so much music in the Bible itself. And it's obviously this thing that God has blessed us with the ability to do. And so, I've never separated that. And I think I was very blessed to have parents that inspired me to be more musical and wanted to invest in our gifts. Every single one of my siblings, I have 3 other siblings, and growing up, obviously, we worked in ministry. We weren't rolling in the dough, but my parents really wanted to buy me the guitar. Or my sister, who's a photographer, a pretty locally known photographer, Jessica LaRue McCann. How do you find her work?
LaRue Photography.
We'll spotlight her on this.
Yeah, she's great. She does all the shoots for pretty much everything you've ever seen, from Coffee and Dreadnoughts and Boutonnieres and stuff like that. So my parents, they wanted, my brother was always a big tech person, so they got him a computer. They really wanted to invest in, not just like the crappy one they could get on Craigslist. They wanted to get him a really good one, and they saw that investment. And so I got a really good guitar coming out of high school, and that kind of inspired me too. So my parents that were always in ministry, they never separated ministry and music in our childhood. So I think that's probably what leads me also to not separate it in my mind.
And in the first 10 chapters of Genesis, you see that culture is being formulated and made, and it's identified with the words. Like, he was a blacksmith. He was a person who wielded metal. He was a man who had instruments. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not a detachment from humanity at all. Like, we are to go into the world and be useful and make useful things and make beautiful things. This is one of the areas where that's why I wanted to have you on, because you're making beautiful music. You're making good and acceptable music. And this is, I listened to one of the tracks you said I had permission to listen to. I played it with my wife. So by extension, we're one flesh. So she's got the authorization too. So I listened to it and I was just like, well, this is great. This is good.
Thank you.
This is music where I'd listen to. That's awesome. I did. I've listened probably 8 times.
That's awesome.
And I was listening to it on the way here. And it not only is it good music, but when you find out that it's made by good and godly men, that part of it just warms my heart. I'm like, more of this, because where you go, no compromise. You take where your ethics, wherever your ethic plumb lines are, you go into that area and you start to reform. You start to gracefully become salt and light. And that for me, it's just hopeful. Like, as despairing as this world is and how it doesn't show us any hope, it looks like it's going down, 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 and down. That when you hear music that's good, you find the story of the men who are making it, and they are good, but they are godly. That's very encouraging, and it leads me to the question of who married this good and godly man. Like, let's go to that story.
Yeah, so I met my wife in high school. Actually, we went to a local high school, Loudoun Valley High School here in Percival area. We technically. She was a year older than me. She was in the same grade as my brother. And we met at our church winter retreat, even though we were at the same high school. And so we kind of hung out from there, and we became friends, and we had mutual friends, and we were always part of like the hang group. And Kelsey is just amazing. She is the smartest person I know by far. She is very artistic in the traditional sense, not the hipster sense. She's not like crocheting things and selling them on Etsy. She's the kind of artsy person that is probably its truest form of being an artsy person. She, as a young person, listened to John Coltrane, which is an insane concept to think that a kid would listen to that and at the same time Nirvana. So, and she's a huge reader, and she's just this very amazing person. She's blessed my life in many different ways. But yeah, we met and we dated for 8 years. Wow. And then got married, which is we usually get a wow after that as well. That was not planned. We did not plan that. No, it was more of we couldn't find a reason to not be together. Our lives moved in the directions that were separate. Like, she would go to college. I dropped out and to pursue music. And so she was in Virginia Tech, and I was traveling a bunch, but we still maintained that relationship. And it was very cool because it forces you to discuss versus sit in front of the movie screen. But I don't judge either way. Right. That's the fun thing is we always justify weird behaviors with the outcome in the end. Because I know people that have gotten married after a couple of months of dating, and that's cool too because you can dive deep. So I don't judge, But yeah, Kelsey is just great. She's this amazing person. She's very strong too. She's a therapist, a local therapist, and so she deals with mostly troubled teens. And I don't know how she does that. It's I don't know how I know she's got a degree to do it, but there's this huge difference between having a degree and being able to do it well. And she's changing lives in a way that I can't imagine I would have the ability to.
I imagine. Well, that was a good story.
Oh, thanks, man.
Your wife, I haven't met her yet, but that's awesome.
Yeah, we've been married for 4 years now. 4 years.
So you guys have known each other though since way back. Since high school.
Oh yeah. Very long time.
Now you have, we talked about this before we were recording. You have a particular set of skills that allows you to be an engineer. Yeah. You've acquired those along the way. We were talking about the benefits of just having the head knowledge versus going through and figuring out how we actually got to the place where we call these things by their names. You want to recapture that story for us?
Yeah. I mean, being a musician, you usually try to stay away from the production side back in the day you did. You didn't touch the soundboard. You didn't get yourself involved or anything like that. You just focused on the music, man. And that was the cool part. But I noticed that at our church, nobody knew how to do anything with the soundboard. And I wanted to obtain knowledge. It's my favorite thing to do, is to obtain knowledge. I love researching. I love learning every single thing I can about the thing. I become very obsessive about one thing. So I dove deep into the soundboard world because I made the connection of I can practice all I want and perform on stage, but if it doesn't sound good to the people, it means nothing. Yeah, and so it was a fire in me to learn that. And so I just picked that skill up myself, and then went to the local community college and learned under some really great people. Zoom Moonchild was one of the professors out there, along with Sean. I don't even remember his last name because we were friends. Is it weird to be friends with your professor? But there were these really great engineers that taught us recording and how to do things in the studio in the non-digital sense. So Sean and Zoom, yes, that's his real name.
His name's Zoom?
His name's Zoom Moonchild. It's the coolest name I've ever heard.
Child of the product of the 60s.
Yeah.
And 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's great. And they would show us why the old school way was important, but also why the new school way of recording things was important. So we did the analog stuff and the digital stuff, where we would take tape and record things to tape, and then he would make us physically edit them by cutting the tape and retaping the tape together and doing fun things like throwing the reel-to-reel tape in the oven to see what it would do and then replay it. We did all that kind of stuff. And it was to learn where the origins of the things we do in the digital world came from. And that was really a huge blessing to learn that. And so I always took these kind of small experiences and did what I can to apply them to the musical life. And it was just a very important thing to do that, as well as actually playing shows and being in bands as well. So I have an engineering side right now. I started working a few years ago at this company that did professional audiovisual installation. So we would work at all the buildings in DC public schools, major buildings, and we would redo their audiovisual systems. And so I learned a lot of the commercial side of audiovisual world, and that's what I'm still doing today. Is I work for a company that just does. I run the audiovisual department at this company, and so I'm still doing that form of engineering. And then I do some work with Seth Dean. We used to do a lot of recording together in this building as well with local bands and stuff. So there's been some traditional education along with the experiences, which I love. That's the way to go for sure.
I can't do the direct quote. What's the quote from the guy from Jurassic Park where he basically says you're abusing the knowledge you had and you didn't earn it?
Yeah, exactly.
That just runs true to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
If you don't earn, or at least put some skin in the game and sweat over what you're actually acquiring, you're learning, you're not going to learn to appreciate it, and you're definitely probably not going to know what you're working with. And the outcome's going to be something where it's going to be augmented to a degree based off of what you assume the outcome could have been. But in making art, like the creative part shouldn't always dictate the outcome. That creative part is for you to come to the very end of it like, I didn't expect we would end up here. This is fantastic. This is actually part of the creative process where we set out to make a goal, but in the end, where did that sound come from? Yeah. It came through the chemistry of being with the person, or you praying about where it is that you want to end the song at, or your project. And you figure out, well, that song that wasn't so loud, that's making the cut. Yeah. It's going right in here at number 7. It brings it all the way back down to where we need, so we can put it right back up on track number 8.
Yeah. Knowing the why behind the how is very important for me. And I stress this, that everybody is different, and your experience is different, and how you create is different. There's no right way in my mind. There's no wrong way in my mind. But
you did say earlier, morally against God's law.
Exactly.
You got to follow a plumb line, but I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, in the context of that, for sure. You have to, in my opinion, for me and the way my brain works, I have to know the how behind the why, or the why behind the how. and that helps you engage. It helps me engage better with the end product. Like, why is this the way it is? Oh, because all these guys came together and said, this is the best way to do it because we tried it, 1,000 times in a different way. And we say, okay, well then I can accept it now. And then I can apply that. How am I applying that artistically?
You build on it. There was a riff in your song that I was listening to. I was like, I don't know how I got there. And I don't know if it was an edit trick. I'll play it for it afterwards. Yeah. But there's this double riff that happens. Yeah, and I'm like, either that's post-edit or he's like doing something on the wah-wah or something. Yeah. Something's happening.
Yeah, I'm a huge gearhead. I'm a massive gearhead. I love gear. But I know, once again, in that I'm an analog type mind person. We record digitally, but everything we do is analog. And when we record stuff for the Boutonnieres, our rule, Chris and I developed kind of this rule, and that is we want to do a single take when we record. So there's not, if I mess up the bridge.
That's punk rock, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we just wanted it to feel. We said we were a stripped down rock and roll band.
You didn't have money back then to do 4 or 5 takes.
No way.
So it comes through that word we were talking about earlier, authentic. Yeah. It's the authentic take. It's the 1-in-1. We're done. Yeah. Or you might revisit with another whole take. Mm-hmm. You can go back maybe now and put in a part that sounds better. But yeah, I mean, when I was involved with bands earlier on in high school, that's what I'd hear. I'd hear the record button go, and the song would end. Yeah. Hardly did you have people stopping and say, well, let's do it all together as a retake. Yeah. We just felt, once again, for what we were trying to accomplish, because I don't suggest that everyone should do this, but yeah, we do single takes. We'll occasionally punch into one thing if it needs a little extra seasoning. But that's another one of our rules is don't over-season the steak. We say that almost every time we go to record it. We don't want to do too much because it can run away from you. The track can run away from you when you're recording. But Chris and I are very good at getting onto each other about not over-seasoning the steak. And yeah, we like to do single takes, but we like to incorporate gear, and that's risky because if the gear doesn't sound good or the delay pedal doesn't sound good, and we don't like to fix things in post either. We want it to have. We're recording in the room that we perform in, and we love that too. Like there's some weird connection within that too. There's some magic there, and we want to capture that feel and that thing because it just feels very wrong to record the verse, stop, record the chorus, stop, record the bridge, stop, and stuff like that. And it's very hard. It's longer to do that kind of thing. And that's why we do self-production. We record all the parts ourselves, and then we send it to important people like Seth for mixing. So shout out to Seth again for mixing this stuff. He's a master at it for sure. And I love keeping things local too, like having somebody that I know that understands my insane brain tweaks that I want to do. But at the same time, we don't want to tweak a lot of the tracks in the sense of we don't want to then get disconnected from what we're doing, what we did in the recording from what the end result is. So we're very particular about keeping it real, not for the sake of being authentic, but for the sake of connecting directly to what we were doing, if that makes sense. We wanted to be a direct path from this thing that I'm doing physically in the room is what you're going to physically be hearing in your ears, and we find that very important. And then that actually is an amazing connection where you can play a record, you can turn it up loud, turn it off, walk into a place where they're performing live, and it's transcendent. It's right there. Yeah. You're missing no beats. Oh, yeah. It's just connecting because there's not a lot that's been edited or changed. Maybe your sound system was not as great. Maybe that will change. That obviously, as an artist, that messes with your mind. Like, what are they playing it with? Because that will affect how the end result sounds. But when you get into the actual place where you're playing that music, I'm often blown away by the live experience 10 times exceeds the recorded part. But I can go back to that album now, remembering what it was live and seeing in my mind and the emotional part of it, it's all there. Yeah. I have what I need. I have a little live, sound recording in my car or wherever I go. That part of listening to you live and now listening to your track, I just there's a connection there, and I know when you guys go further and you record more, it's going to be amazing.
Thank you, man.
It's going to be good for not only you guys for your own personal, creative talents, like working that out, figuring out where you're going to go with this, but it's good enough that I think you guys could do something with this for life. So
thank you.
You're probably on the same track. Like, I would like to do that too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've always had a very realist thought process with music. Because I did the touring thing. I played with bands that were very popular. We played just about every major Christian festival, main stage, side stage, everything. And it got to the point where I would see the older guys we would tour with get burned out. And they would say stuff like, I really wish I pursued my job before this thing. And so even though I'm a music person, I've always felt a need to make sure that I can financially support myself without, quitting everything and doing music. And so because to me, music is a therapy. I know that's very cliche, but it helps me articulate things and it helps me stay focused and engaged, and it helps me with internal struggles. And connect to a community and building communities for people. And that's what really it's been about. So it's not always been this thing where I want to quit everything and do it, because I've done that. But who knows, man? I'm open to anything, wherever the Lord kind of takes this and whatever we end up doing with the music. That's what we're willing to do.
I had Daniel Huffington come on, and same premise, establishing foundation for life through his primary vocation or profession. And then the idea, he's a good artist and he wants to do good music, and he can also do that as he's simultaneously building his family, building up his
It's not very rock and roll, but it's, to me, like I really love the idea of having the ability to have a congregation, contribute to the church, and right. do that kind of thing. It's not very rock and roll to say I want to keep my day job and play music. But that's the cool part of this world that we live in now is you can upload music to iTunes and Spotify yourself after you put it together, and that's really cool in a lot of ways. It's really bad in a lot of ways. But it's a cool world we live in, and you don't have to quit your life to pursue music as a career or as a side project or as something. And if you have a good team and you're good at what you think, if you're as good as you think you are, or you're working to get there, you're going to be successful in the way you define what success is. I've said that many a time before, but you just got to determine those parameters yourself and then go from there. But yeah, it's not very rock and roll, but at the same time, this is 2019, man.
Well, let's go back. I mean, these are the principles of our Christian faith.
Yeah.
Like you're a man, right?
Yeah. So
within that, there's parameters of responsibility, and you've got provisional aspect where you have to take control of your life. You can't just live in this realm of unexpected freestyle. So you mirror the music. You'd asked the question earlier, what's the future of rock and roll, or will rock music come back again?
Yeah.
I think the question also for you as a Christian should be, how does a man live well while he can make this music?
Yeah.
And sharing your responsibilities of creating this music and also being the man that God has called you to be. I'm actually I don't want you to go full rock and roll, like if that means to the detriment of your wife and potential family.
Right.
I think that would be something where you'd come in as a responsible man of God to this community that's figuring out, like, hey, I want to play this music. I want to get the sound that God's, or not even God, like the sound that's on my heart out to the world. Where you as an elder in this experience with them say, no, I mean, there's a proper order of things. Like taking care of your house, ensuring that you're able to sustain what it is that you're building, and the experience of seeing people fade out. Or
and once again, everyone's experience is different. There are people that can do that, and then they can sustain well on that world. And so I've had lots of friends that do that successfully, and it's amazing. And I just never felt that. It's kind of the difference between being a missionary in a third world country versus doing missions here, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so it's never been my calling of let me quit everything and do this. And I think some people do have that calling, and they should do that 100%. To me, there was a lot. I did witness moral failure from Christians that did do that in the rock scene. And I saw, once again, people get burned out and people say crazy things like, I regret having kids and I regret getting married, and I should have just, if I didn't do that, then I would be successful. Or, because to me, I made the decision. I wanted to marry that girl ASAP, and that's why we waited 8 years. Just kidding. But we had this really cool experience of she went to college, and my college experiences was tour and rock and roll and playing music, and so I kind of got that at a really cool time where you can get away with doing that. Like back then you could just survive on peanut butter, and you can do that. I can't really do that now. Like, I found out my body needs nutrition. I didn't know that at the time. And I could sleep for like 2 hours and wake up and drive to Texas and play a show.
In the same clothes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now I can't do that. But yeah, so there's definitely I never felt a pull to do that, but I definitely know people that have done that and have changed lives doing that too. Yeah. So there's always a to and fro from that.
So you in your life, you figured out that, okay, you're going to be a Christian, you're going to find a lady, you're going to settle up with your wife, you're going to make a family. Now you've got a point in your life where you figured, hey, I've got these talents, I have these friends, we've got this showcase that happens. Let's figure out how to do this. Let's write some songs. What's the end game with that? You've kind of talked about it before, but where do you want to see this going? And also talk about the fact that at this local church that we're recording at, you're a part of it. How does that play?
Yeah, the end game question, that's a good question, because
it's okay if it's a process too. It doesn't really have to have all your conclusions here.
Yeah, the end game is really to, once again, I think it's more towards the therapeutic side for me, and having a wife that's a therapist, it's more of the actual term therapist, not the ironic thing of, it helps me release. It's more of, when you go to therapy, it's really hard. Going to therapy is not easy. You're working with your therapist to get those things out of you that they need to help to get out of you to figure out what's going on in your life. And so that hard struggle bit is what people fail to do in counseling, I would imagine. They just want you to fix what's going on, or they want some medication or whatever. And for rock music and playing music, it's about that struggle as well. Like what do I want to do with this? Where am I going with this? And how? So there's not really an end game. It's just more of we're doing things and seeing where they lead. The congregation side of it is important, though. Once again, the communal aspect is always been, like we said, that's part of what's been inspiring to me to do music when I was a kid. And so building a community, because we have so many cool local churches, and there's lots of guys and girls that are doing some amazing things around here. And so I really wanted to build a platform we could come together despite what church you're a part of, or if you're not a part of any church at all, that you can come into this random building in Lovettsville and experience music and good coffee. And so that's always been important. So I guess the end game is really growing the movement locally is a big part of that. And then just making some rock and roll. And like you said, with the, will rock and roll come back? I hope it does. I hope that rock and roll is this thing that comes back. I feel like it is going to come back. You see a lot of these guys like Greta Van Fleet doing the Led Zeppelin thing, and people are into that because I think they're realizing that pop music can only fulfill a temporary pleasure. And once again, I like pop music. I'm critical of everything. I'm a very critical person by nature, and so I'm not.
Too much of a good thing can be.
Exactly, yeah. And to me, whenever I get really sad when I think about the state of the music industry, something amazing happens, like an Adele will happen, and you're like, that's exactly what needs to be happening. Because the weird thing is pop music's not a genre,
right?
It's what's popular in the sense of. So it's not something that we can even point to as a thing that's bad or good. And so it's not fair to say pop music is bad or good, because we as the people that are determining what's pop music, like James Bay is someone that's popular right now, and that's not pop music at all, and Adele's not even pop music at all, but it's on the pop radio, the hit radio, I think is what everyone calls it now. And so it's this monster that we can't catch and define, and so it's hard to point to. So it's kind of unfair to say I hate pop music, because I really do love some pop music, but I also love junk food that's not good for you. And so that intake, listening to the pop music for me, because I connect with music on this emotional level, music's always been a very emotional thing for me, exploring my emotions. And I think that's why I like the blues. And I think that's why the emo movement was very important in my life, because the emo music was essentially our version of the blues.
Yeah.
It was this thing of, we're going to express our emotions and we're going to shout our emotions. And one of the most, spiritual feelings I've ever felt was at a Dashboard Confessional concert, where literally hundreds and hundreds of people are shouting at the top of their lungs the music that they're feeling inside of them. And that was incredible. It was one of the best concerts I've ever been to.
I shared one of those moments too as well. I was listening to them at the Warped Tour.
Oh yeah, man.
It was just I was like, over here in a mosh pit, come over here, listen to this guy with sleeves, slicked back hair.
Yeah, man.
There was nobody else except for him and a guitar, and everybody was singing along, shouting an acoustic song.
Because it's the only way to do it. You have to. It's like this thing. I'm getting goosebumps like thinking about it, and that's the kind of connection that I also chase with music as well. And so that is popular, but and chasing that emotional. But the problem is when it's junk food that can, like, if they. Nothing is real, right? Like, art isn't, like, everything's a lie. Like, I got really bad news for you. Even the live recordings that we were talking about earlier, every single artist redoes takes over the live stuff. Nothing's ever really live. There's no such thing as a band that doesn't do that, honestly. Or they'll re-record the vocals over the live vocals and dub it in and whatnot. So knowing that, and knowing that, and this is true in worship music, unfortunately too, is there can be something untrue, something immoral, or maybe something non-doctrinally correct.
Right.
But if you put that E minor chord like right at that moment, and that piano swells in, it gives you goosebumps. So you can be literally reading or singing a lie, and it'll give you goosebumps, and that should freak us out, because that is our brain saying you need to make this emotional connection to this. And so that's why I have to stay away from pop music, because I have to regulate my use of pop music, because junk in, junk out kind of thing. There's not a disconnection between who I am and what I'm intaking musically. Some people can do that. I feel, they can kind of listen to things, but I would say they've probably convinced themselves that it doesn't affect them, but it can affect them, because there have been psychological studies about this over and over, about how music affects your brain, where they run the mice through the maze and they play classical music, and the mouse is like way faster during classical music versus they put like Metallica on, and the mouse gets real confused. And that's not to say that, once again, not a genre can be morally incorrect, but as long as it's within good moral reason and truth, I'm not saying that metal music is a bad thing and that pop music is a good thing. They also, once again, fall into that context of what's morally correct. But at the same time, it freaks me out when I can have an emotional response to something that I know is not true. And then giving yourself sacrificing decisions for fun times is also a weird thing too. Like, Miley Cyrus is obviously a non-moral person at this day and age in 2019, but like when Party in the USA comes on at a wedding, you're like, oh man, like it's good. You cannot dance to that thing too, and that connection. I
don't dance, but I get what you're saying.
Maybe you internally dance in your mind.
But there's an excitement. It goes back to the emotions.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Decade Under the Influence by Taking Back Sunday. Just for me, that was a song I connected to.
Yeah.
The lyrics, I'd read the lyrics from some of those bands, and sad to say this, like, I emotionally connected with those songs.
Oh yeah. And
some of the lyrics, I look back now as I am a parent and a husband, I'm like, oh, my kids aren't going anywhere near these songs.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Not only there's sexual content, there's suicide, there's the talk of threats of killing people. but as I was a teen or somebody who was growing up with that music coming out, not only did I related to what was going on emotionally, I look back now, I don't think the church properly gave us a place. I didn't grow up in the church, but I visited a church, and it was almost as if they were trying to palette my understanding through worldly lenses.
Yeah.
And the music was in the same vein, so I went back to the world's music, and it was really just, they had no conclusion, they had no hope. It was very hopeless. And you're talking to a generation of people who listen to the music, connect to it. You just said, like, when this song comes on, everybody wants to party, because it relates back to the emotions, the raw humanity of us. And so, what's the church's responsibility in creating music that's good, can be played, obviously, maybe at the pop level, but maybe even in the church setting, like at the actual physical church. We don't want to just have resources that are explicitly just for the church, just for them.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to have good resources, but what are we to offer to the world as they go out and they dance? Because they will.
That's a real good point in the sense of in the way that I've seen in my workings with a lot of different churches from being in Christian bands. We would go to these churches, and to me, it's a crazy idea that we would even get booked at churches, because we were a normal rock alternative Christian band, and we had very, very moral lyrics. We weren't, thrash metal or anything insane. Like, the parents could enjoy our music, but we'd go to some of these places, and they were more specialized churches for a specific goal. And I thought that was a really good way to connect to, because we one time we played this show that was like a biker church, where it was all these bikers, and I mean every single person was a biker.
Yeah, like biking on the trails.
Oh no, those people don't go to church. They're just kidding. No, motorcycle people. They it was, and so they got it. Like,
don't go to church.
Sorry, I don't like bikers.
No, I'm right there.
The bicyclists.
It's like, I got so many bad feelings right now about them.
Stay on the W&OD trail. We built that for you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Especially in this area, because we have. Those that are listening are not in this area. We have this historic bike trail, essentially walking trail, that was refitted by the state years ago, and it's purposeful. Its purpose is for you to walk on it and take your bike on it. And we're arguing.
It's like hundreds of miles long too.
Yeah, like, use it.
It's not like 7 miles and then they're bored.
And there's a group that's a Facebook group, it's like Bikers' Rights. It's like, no, stop it.
They want the ability to have all the rights the cars do without any of the consequences. And that's where I get mad.
I was just meeting someone the other day in the morning, and literally I saw this group of bicyclists coming through town, and none of them stopped at the stoplight.
Oh,
I wanted to go out and do something.
Citizens arrest.
But I was like, that's the part where they don't see how we as regular drivers and transports, we get frustrated.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
I'm not going to move over to the left.
But anyway, bikers.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Triggered me.
Good tangent. Triggered me as well. It was a church with a specific thing in mind. And so we were able to play kind of like harder rock there, versus we'd have to cater more to a different audience. And so we developed that aspect in a few of the bands I was in. But that was a really cool way to say, all right, this church isn't limiting what it means to worship, or this church isn't limiting what art should be according to our little church made up doctrine of what we're deciding is worship, or what we're deciding is good music and moral music according to them. And whenever Christianity puts things in a box like that, I think we get in trouble. And I think that's why even now we have movements that are going to the other extreme, where they're like, look, you should be able to say whatever you want, do whatever you want, and without moral. And there's always gray areas. Like, I remember one time we played this church, and the pastor that booked us pulled me aside, because I was always the guy that had to talk to the pastors, which was always really fun in the sense of, like, we had to feel out, like, did they actually listen to us before we showed up? Or they, usually a lot of the times pastors would pull us inside and be like, "Now you guys are only going to play worship music tonight, right?" And we're like, "Oh dear, you have not listened to anything that we've done."
What's your definition of worship?
Yeah, exactly. And so the pastor pulled me aside at this one church in Pennsylvania one time, and he was like, "Okay, so last week we booked this band, and he started singing." And they put like the words up on the screen like they would for worship for normal performances. Like they book for their Sunday morning worship, they just book bands to come in and play their own music, and then they meditate on the lyrics. It's pretty cool, really cool concept. But he was like, all right, so this guy came and performed, and he started talking about like real sexual topics within marriage. And you're like, that's not good to broadcast on a Sunday morning. So you can have like these like things and write them and in context, keep them for the art that you're trying to do. But like, so I know that there's extremes, you know, or there's the idea that we can blow through certain moralities and that's what needs to be acceptable. Because if it's not, then we'll fail as a Christian society. So there's some weird balance there, I think, too. Like there is probably with just about everything, a good balance gets us, you know, too much control, not any parameters. Both of them can be bad.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting right now is we're seeing a moral, I guess, return almost to some in the youth that want to have a traditional life. But not with the parameters of what it looks like to be religiously traditional. But like, there's no problem with me having, a wife, and loving her well and treating her well, and not being, misogynistic overlord,
right?
Denigrating and making her a house slave.
Yep.
But if she wants to stay at home and be a homemaker, we're looking at that as less of a limiting of what her femininity is, but actually an exploration of what that could be, and motherhood, and being somebody who's taking care of children, ensuring that they're protected and they're cultivating, a home that's loving and desirous for people to come into and have a hospitality. I immediately think of Ethan and Emmy, in their home and how they've created their lifestyle. Oh yeah. And these are friends of yours, friends of ours?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I met Ethan Dean and Emmy Dean at the first Coffee and Dreadnoughts we did. We put together here, and ever since then we've been friends. We've worked on multiple projects together. We've performed in multiple different bands together and recorded projects with them. And I played drums for Emmy and Ethan for a little while too. And really, we have them perform in the worship band here at Catoctin Bible Church all the time. So they're actively in my life, and they really have a really cool sense of that open door policy world, which I think is essential. I think my question too is like, why, I don't know if it's because I'm a musician, but why in Christianity why is music the thing that's picked on the most in my mind? like people will be super critical about music more than they will be about just about anything else they intake in their life. And it's such a weird concept to me.
There's two roaming factors that I've identified. It's fashion and it's music. Fashion expresses itself over to music, but fashion also is somewhere where it's ever changing.
Yeah.
So in the church, the doctrinal component that's never changing is the gospel, right? It's a clear, concise, continual message. And so the things that come in and try to look and change visually for us, specifically if it's more traditional, scares us. Yeah. Because the uncertainty of where it might go or evolve. That's true. And so the fashion part always will be a red flag for most. Stripping down from, wearing regular suits to casual wear to shorts and sandals. The question raises, do you not respect? Do you not respect the forefathers? Or do you not respect our traditions? Then when you introduce, like you were talking about before, the learning with the acoustic and just going straight for the electric. Where's your sense of decency?
Oh my goodness, you went straight for the devil guitar. You're supposed to play the Jesus guitar, then you can go to the devil guitar.
And I think it's by nature that like we want to do things by order. I think when we rebel, we ultimately know why we're rebelling. Right. Because we don't like the structure. We don't like, because it's not agreeable to where we are in our sensibilities. Or even in our flesh. But I see those two, fashion and music. Those things will always be the ebbs and flows, and they'll be the ones that will always strawman and will destroy first. Oh
yeah, man, that's such a good point. I think that's probably the story of my life, man. Like in ministry and music. So my parents, like I said, were always involved with ministry, and the most hurtful things in my life in a spiritual aspect and musical aspect didn't come from my biology teacher teaching evolution or my college English professor spitting their morality onto me. It didn't come from any of that. It always came from the church. The biggest pain that I've ever felt have been from elders' mouths, and pastors' mouths and their actions. And my parents, when they were, their whole vision, their number one goal that they felt God was leading them to do in their life is to always focus on giving the gospel. Every church here, talking about every Sunday at church, my dad at the end of his message gives a clear gospel on how you can accept Christ. And that's always been their big vision. And so they always had these big blowout and really they played rock music in the 90s for their big camps that they would perform on, and they would have all these things, and there was always controversy, right? Like there was either some jealousy there from another ministry or something, there's character assassination, my dad's hair was too long and they didn't like that, and that somehow led to a moral flaw, or they didn't like that we named one of the camps that we put on, one of the titles of the camps was called Boycott Hell, based on an old DeGarma and Key song. And Boycott Hell, they didn't like that we said the word hell. They thought that was insane, that, people are going to turn away from the church and forsake God's name because we named something Boycott Hell. And so that has been kind of the story.
Don't we want to boycott hell?
Exactly,
I don't
man.
not want to usher in more souls there.
Oh my goodness! But they
the
just
premise behind that, I'm
that.
assuming, is that you would want to do anything to not get to hell.
Exactly, and it's not like we were at these super legalistic churches, right? It's not like they were like
allies of the gospel.
Yeah, we were wearing jeans on Sundays. Yeah. It wasn't one of those things, but that's always been. We didn't fit in. My parents didn't fit in the box. They would do like pyrotechnics during the summer camps.
Start a hashtag.
Yeah.
Boycott hell.
Boycott hell. It's a good DeGarma and Key song. It's awesome. They were kind of like the, I think they were like an 80s, 90s band. But yeah, they had some really funny stuff. But we never fit into that box. My parents never did. And so therefore, by default, I didn't fit into that box. But my parents were also very, they didn't let things take hold of us, because they would see in our life, like, okay, we know that music and movies affects you as a kid, psychologically and spiritually. And so my mom would do this thing, like if we were watching Mulan, the part would come on where the ancestral ghosts come out of the grave, and my mom would be like, now kids, that's not real, that's not what God's truth is for us. And we'd roll our eyes and be like, no, Mom. But it was important because it taught us to not let things take hold. Like once she said that, it didn't have a grip on us anymore. And so it's very important, I think, in culture to do that as a Christian. It's not morally wrong to watch Mulan, obviously, right, which some people I feel like would argue. But how are you letting things not take hold of you, if that makes sense? And I think that's applied to music. And once again, I think music, probably gets the majority of the hits, because there is some hard sense of, if you're paying for something that does have a moral question, that even if you're letting it release, you're contributing to this. So there's lots of crazy depths that goes to. So I get that. But I think people make excuses for things that they enjoy, but when it comes to music that they don't like, it's always something they can easily take down.
We have the Church Too movement, the thing that mirrors Me Too, where the church itself is underneath. It probably is no surprise, but the church is full of sinners. Yeah, and so we're full of people who are unadmittedly hypocrisy. Filled with hypocrisy. Yeah. And the worst part about it is, if we lie to ourselves in the dark, when we lie to each other in the light, there's no authenticity for us to come out and say, I'm struggling. Yeah. Because nobody can identify with anybody. Mm-hmm. But we're all in this together, and we figure out that the one part of the body starts to suffer. We all should be suffering. Mm-hmm. But if you're not able, because it's the space has not been created for you to come out and say, hey, I'm struggling in this way. Yeah. Then you have these internal things that just blow up. You're like, wow, Eddie or Park, whoever it would be. Like, did you hear about them? Yeah, I didn't see that coming. Yeah. And I think it's really good that your mom did what you just explained about the part in the movie. Mm-hmm. Very small, but it's very developmentally appropriate. Yeah. You're teaching them to discern. That's primarily what she was doing. Yeah. She was basically saying, this is what will happen. The world will have ideas, but we have truth. Mm-hmm. You can't go anywhere without running up against what the people in the world determine is truth. Yeah. But your ability to be loving and kind towards them, and being able to rightly divide and discern, and know that, hey, if they're teaching this, then they also need Jesus. That's the first thing you should identify. If they're teaching different spirits.
And it goes back to the concept of, like I was jokingly saying, nothing's real, art is a lie. The concept of every single thing in music and movies and podcasts and YouTube videos and your teacher and your uncle, everyone's trying to get you to believe something, right? Whether they're doing it subconsciously themselves to you, or they're trying to subconsciously get you to believe something. Everything's trying to communicate something, because that's like a pretty big definition of art.
Right.
And so you have to ask yourself, what are they trying to communicate? Do I believe this? Is this good for me? Is this good for my personality? Is this good for my walk? How is this affecting me? Does it have good consequences? Does it have bad consequences?
Yeah, that's key.
And that, I think, is if we're trying to be authentic, the A word again.
We've used that quite a few times. It's an appropriate word to use. It's just because of this
it's
generation.
Just, I hate it. I hate the word so much.
I talked about that in previous conversations, where the most unauthentic thing is to say that you're authentic.
Yeah. Oh my
goodness.
Agreed.
Everybody agrees.
Yeah.
But it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's a useful word. We should redeem it.
Yep.
We are. It's okay.
We're getting there, right? Like, especially in the Christian culture, because we've always been 10 years behind everything.
Yeah.
And so we're getting there. I feel like, in the sense of, okay, we realize now authenticity is important, but now how are we getting there? How are we giving each other the benefit of the doubt? Like, I feel like that's
the grace and the space to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, I've struggled with that, being somebody who, my wife, if she was here, she could attest to this.
Yeah.
I'm very much by the book person.
Mm-hmm.
I almost with anything, we have to go back to what is right and what is good.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody knows me, I know I don't do everything right, and I don't do everything good.
Yeah.
But it's from my own heart, and this is a hard issue for me. Mm-hmm. If I'm a person who's leading something and I don't set a higher standard than where I think people might want to shoot, a lower area, just so we can get by, I have this moral responsibility, in my heart at least, to say, hey, no, we're shooting for the highest and the most exemplary form of excellence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there has to be the space in between that says, I can never really get there.
Right.
And I need your help. I'm actually struggling. And having community and having friends and being vulnerable and being acceptable to whatever they have to say, accepting of whatever they have to say to you.
Yeah, maybe looping it around to the concept of why we loved shouting those songs with Dashboard is we connected with it, and maybe we had a struggle, and so it was the only place we felt safe enough to do it.
I would never sing half those songs to my mom or dad or my siblings.
Or
they would shout me down and say, "Where are you in life?
Yeah,
what's wrong with you?"
Yeah,
it's like,
you need counseling right now.
I'm going through it.
Yeah, but even then, like, why in Christianity has counseling been a bad thing for so long too? Yeah. Like this idea, and once again, I'm pretty biased because my wife's a therapist, but even on TV shows, the therapist is usually the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like they're the weird person, they're the shrink, and so the secular world has done that. And in the Christian, we live in the same world. There's no secular and Christian world. We're all in the same world. But in the Christian atmosphere, we have decided that that's not good. It means you're not walking with Christ correctly, and that's insane to me, right. Or this idea that medication is a terrible thing or a really good thing.
Our counselor.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And if you want to be, a church that reflects his goodness and his nature, we must concede that counseling is good.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be in like this rigid, like the rigorous form of how the world would structure it. But we could consent a little bit to the fact that not just marriage counseling, but the individual self.
Yeah.
Like you having issues emotionally, you can't really work those out. I have, and I might edit some of this, but I have dealt with some people who have gone to similar churches with you and I, and they have gone through counseling, and they've talked about these great big issues, and they're fearful to come out of counseling to the church.
Oh yeah.
And I'm thinking, wait a minute, we just went down a good line here of going to counseling. But how do we bridge that to say, no, what you're speaking in confidence with this brother who is a counselor, who's a professional.
Yeah.
We need to bridge the gap to bring it back to the congregation. And again, we have to be mindful of those whom we say, the deepest parts of our hearts.
Yeah.
To.
That's true. Like how are we, because I think probably there's a lot of fear of, and maybe part of it is we as people, when we hear the people talking about the people that have confessed something or that have had some moral failure, and then they come out to the church about, because that happens all the time. That's happened in my whole life of ministry, where we've had a person who is on staff have supreme moral failure, and how is the church disciplining in the correct way?
Right.
But at the same time, because we've seen both sides of that spectrum in my parents' life of ministry, where my dad has caught a pastor in adultery, and the church got mad at my dad for catching him in adultery. Insane things like that. So that side of the spectrum, and then the other side of of we need to kick them out and they need to move to a different state in order for them to feel comfortable again, which is insane. Both of those are insane, and both of those are the problem with Christianity, because we're saying we're very hypocritical, and I think maybe the way we help eradicate that is in our own mind. We're very careful to discuss with somebody, especially with the rumors, because the rumor mill is what always does everybody wrong too. Is, did you hear that this happened? Did you hear that's why they left the church? And misinformation becomes more, it's telephone,
and it starts kind of off with the we should pray.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then you go into the
it's
details.
Always hidden in something Christ-like, which is horrendously terrifying. Because all of it can be done with good intentions, right? Like, oh, we need to communicate to the staff the details of this thing that happened at the church, and so that is the way we need to do it. We need to be godly about it and communicate it, but we don't need this level of detail that's going to literally physiologically change the way we think about a person.
Yeah, I've had information come to me where it's changed. And
right.
I've had the Holy Spirit change my perspective of it, because some things you can't unimagine about a person, and you're just kind of I don't know if that was useful. It could have just been I sinned a particular thing, but I didn't need to know all the particular things. And that does being in the church as long as I have, and you as well. These experiences, it was we want to be helpful, but I think now we've tried to just maybe, in a sense, again, it goes back to the motives, but the motives of the hearts, but I've seen a lot of it where now we have this thing over them.
Yeah.
And it's more of a manipulative tool.
Yeah.
And Satan gets a hold of that real quick and destroys lives, destroys families.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that the church is very prone to the idea of control in general.
Control the narrative.
Yeah, control the narrative.
However leadership was, or you perceived as being wrong, let's control. Maybe that's why your father got, ostracized for calling out. It's because
which is
control
insane.
The narrative.
Yep.
Everything is normal. And if
it didn't fit in that box.
Take care of it.
It didn't fit in the box again. We love the situation we're in. We don't want the situation to change, and that's why you have, full, religion, other religion or religious organizations, really hiding scandals, for generations, and that happens because they say it's for the good of God's mission, and they always have really good ways to justify it. Our church will fall apart if we say that the head pastor that committed this insane supreme moral failure should maybe step down for a little bit, or maybe should step down overall, or seek counseling, or do any of these things. Yeah, it's definitely a poison in the church by far. This idea that somehow we're supposed to be these different people without any of the flaws that we already have upon birth.
Quick question: green sky or blue skies, green boots? What's it mean?
Oh yeah, so it's a really good question.
This is a song which the listeners will hear eventually.
Yeah,
it's
the name of our first single is called Green Boots. And I'm a concept writer. I'm figuring out how, because I've always been the guy that's behind the scenes guy. For all these bands that I've worked with, whether it's local bands or touring bands, my job has always been in the behind the scenes consultant guy who comes in and moves things from good to great, not because I'm great, but because I can see how that person's trying to get to the thing that they need to conclude. So I just help them along that path. I'm obsessed with that, whether it's with gear, because one of the bands I joined, I said, okay, we're a serious band, we're signed to a record label. They were called Skyhawk Drive. They were just an amazing group. We signed to Skies Fall Media, who's Ben Kaska, who's the guitarist from Skillet. So some name drops. Watch your feet. I'm dropping some names. Really big deal. And so we needed to be professional. So I said there should never be a technical issue in our shows. And so any gear or anything we did, everything needed to be flowing, and the stage changes need to be good. So I've always done that. And so I've never been a lyricist. I've never been a writer. I've only been mostly instrumental writing. So figuring out, all right, let's try this, let's try that in the recording sessions. So very producer-like in that aspect. So I'm still figuring out what I'm doing. I'm
singing in my head when I walked in here.
Nice.
I looked up. I was like, "Hey, it's blue skies."
Blue sky, green boots.
I got like turquoise sandals.
So I'm really good at all that to say I'm figuring out my writing style, and I'm very good at concepts. And so I read this story about when people hike Mount Everest. There's a person who died hiking Mount Everest. And there's tons of people, all kinds of people die hiking Mount Everest. And there's a particular person that died in a tragic event that happened in a snowstorm many years ago. And his body is used as a warning and a landmark to climbing Mount Everest. And he's known as Green Boots because he has these. The body has green boots on. It's really sad because they can't get the body down. It's too dangerous, and so but it's used as a warning. Like if you're not serious about this, you're getting to the summit, you could die here, and it's used as a warning. And so I heard that story and I was just very inspired by that person's life. Like, what was that person doing? What was their life, and how did it lead to this? And then I bridged that with something going on in my life. Mm-hmm. So Green Boots is if you can Google the story, it's quite interesting. I think there's actually a Netflix documentary about it. Not about the person, because no one actually knows who it is. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. It's like a mystery as to who Green Boots is. But yeah, that's how I do it. I find a concept like that, and then I write it along with something that's going on in my life, and that seems to work out pretty well.
No, that was good, because it's on my mind, and I was relating it into my own way. And I liked how I don't know the effect that you have on that. Is that an echo chamber or something with your voice? Yeah,
we really love to do kind of that old school echo sound.
Yeah, my wife, I told you when I played it with my wife, she's like, "Is that something from the 70s?"
That makes my heart so happy.
I thought
that's what we wanted to do. We really love late 60s, early 70s groove, soul, blues, rock stuff, and so that's exactly what we were going for. So that's great to hear.
It's very punchy. You got your bass in the background. I'm a bass player, so I definitely am hearing that.
Oh, nice. Low-end Lopez.
There he is. I'm hearing the music that just is, like you said, will rock have a return. And I'm thinking that if anything local comes out and it's rock oriented, we've got an artist here.
Why, thank
you. Been
you.
able to do that. You've been able to do it well. With the Boutonnieres, with Coffee and Dreadnoughts, with your sister's photography.
Yeah.
How do you say that again? LaRue?
LaRue Photography. LaRue. Yeah.
And then Emmy and Ethan,
yeah,
you've got them working their projects.
So many good local stuff, and that's really what Coffee and Dreadnoughts was made for. Is there's so many good local places, and part of that, the major band I was a part of, Skyhawk Drive, they were a part of this little town in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. It's like a trucker town, like it's a truck stop, and that's it. Their Taco Bell closes at 10 p.m. That's how weird this town is.
Yeah.
And they built this amazing local scene with all these kids. And so all these bands started out, and we were able to support these bands because we had hundreds of people come out to our local shows, and we were able to get kids that were starting bands or had bands that were going a part of that movement. And Roland Bingaman was the guy that started Skyhawk Drive, and he's actually starting some new music out too. He's an incredible guy. He's my favorite person to work with of all time. He's a genius. He is somebody who's musically gifted and can write music just insanely well. Him along with his friend Chris Potter, who I'm good friends with, who's played in the Boutonnieres a few times. And he's starting some new music up too, and so I'm getting to perform with him some as well. Hopefully soon. He's got some new music out, so check it out. It's under Roland Lewis, is his name, and he's a great example of somebody who is struggling, who's had this really hard time in life recently. I mean, really, really tough part in life, and wrote lyrics down, and then got inspired to actually put them out there. And so that's really cool to see as well. So yeah, I'm trying to get him to come to Coffee and Dreadnoughts. Nothing official yet, but I'm gonna have to burn some favors to get him to come to that. But
I'll contact him for you.
Oh, he's the best. You should have him on the podcast for sure.
Definitely, I've heard of him a few times through this. Yeah. And we also have Nate Bittner from Butler, Maggie Miles, Daniel Huffington.
Oh yeah,
there's just some names in this area where these are people who are making good music. It isn't just friends that we want to spotlight. Like these are people that you're saying you want to showcase.
Yeah. I wouldn't bring them to Coffee and Dreadnoughts if I didn't like them. Yeah. Like, I'm not one to book people that I don't enjoy to listen to. Yeah. I'm not that kind of venue runner. I don't know what I am.
You're a really good friend, but you know how to put on the showcase.
Yeah. And it's interesting because none of these people I knew before I booked at Coffee and Dreadnoughts. Like, I didn't know Nathan or Daniel.
I didn't know you before this.
Yeah.
So you've created a culture of community. And
good. I'm glad it's working.
you can create a culture of toxicity or destruction. But you've created this community where you've brought together like-minded people, and you've already seen the fruit of what your vision looks like. And I'm just excited to see what it looks like in the next 5 years. Because I know that the just outside view that you've got something going on here. And
thanks.
We appreciate you coming on the podcast. We appreciate the work that you're doing. I definitely think we're going to have a follow-up.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about other topics, but we dived into some others in this particular podcast where I'm already interested in picking your brain about that.
Let's do it, man.
All right, man. Appreciate you. And everybody who's listening, you can follow Jeremiah at the page.
Yeah, you can hit me out up on Instagram. I'm on Instagram a lot. The IG, as the kids call it.
The IG. And like you said earlier, it'll all be in the show notes where you can contact him if you feel as if you're so inclined to meet Mr. Jeremiah's particular preference of music. You shoot him over some stuff as well. So thanks for everybody for listening to this episode of the Shield Wall Podcast. We ask that everybody continue to hold the line.
Thank you for listening to the Shield Wall Podcast. Our goal is to glorify Christ and strengthen the hearts of men. We've got more episodes on the way, so if you liked what you heard, subscribe and share. For more info and articles, visit our website, shieldwalldiscipleship.org. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for Shield Wall Discipleship. Thanks again, and until next time, hold the line.